In the spring of 1954, on the invitation of the central government, the Dalai Lama traveled to Beijing to attend the First National People's Congress. Most of the central leadership, including Zhu De and Zhou Enlai, went to the station to welcome him. During the Congress, the Dalai Lama spoke highly of the achievements in Tibet since the peaceful liberation. He was also elected Vice Chairman of the NPC. Following the Congress, the Dalai and Panchen Lamas went on an inspection tour of several provinces. Mao Tsetung spent Tibetan New Year with them. In his autobiography, published several years later, the Dalai Lama describes the happiness of those days. In 1956, the Preparatory Committee for Tibet Autonomous Region was formed as a political consultative organization. One of the committee's first actions was to abolish the head tax on government officials and students. Until then, many children, even though they now attended school, were still identified as serfs according to the provisions of the head tax. The abolition of the head tax came as a great relief to Noang Sering, who was by then at Lhasa Middle School.
所以这个的话，对我们来讲，农奴来讲，这是一个政治上的一个大事。等于就是说，展望我获得了人身自由。在这一前段，你做什么行动都得要服从于他。
However, the new policy severely undermined the privileges of the nobility. At the monasteries, the lamas were opposed to the abolition head tax. For a while, unrest threatened to engulf Tibet. Parachute landings by agents became common after 1957. According to the book Orphans of the Cold War, written by a former CIA officer, two of the Dalai Lama's brothers, Norbu and Gyalo Tonduk, worked for the CIA. In secret, they selected Tibetans for special training in Colorado and on Saipan Island. There they were taught unarmed combat and shooting, how to use wireless telephones and guerrilla tactics, and were then sent back to Tibet with orders to foment unrest. In 1957, Chinese leader Mao Tsetung was confronted with a choice similar to that faced by American President Abraham Lincoln almost 100 years earlier. The choice between liberating slaves and national peace. Mao Tsetung declared that within 6 years, no social reform would be carried out in Tibet. After 6 years, whether reform was needed would depend on the transformation of the ruling class of Tibet. However, certain members of the Tibetan nobility, mistaking his magnanimity for weakness, decided to take advantage.
这个封建农奴主阶级，他看到了自己作为一个阶级的末日，他们希望怎么样？他们希望永远不改革。你只是等待，只是推迟，他是不愿意的。不改革有什么办法吗？一个最好的办法就是独立出去，我不归你中央政府管了，实质就在这里，分裂出去，我就可以不改革，我就可以永远保持这种封建农奴制度。那么在这个制度，这个政教合一的制度中， 我是统治阶级，我有既得利益，我的利益就可以长期的保存下去，就是为了这个发动的叛乱。
On the morning of March 10th, Tangguang San, a Tibetan official appointed by the central government, was waiting for the Dalai Lama in the auditorium at the headquarters of the Tibetan army. A month earlier, at the Potala Palace, the Dalai Lama had expressed his desire to see a performance there. Many years later, the Dalai Lama admitted that he had been personally responsible for making all the arrangements that day. Although Tangguang San waited all day, the Dalai Lama failed to show up. Lhasa, at that time, was in a state of turmoil. Rumors were spreading. One was that the Han people were going to kidnap the Dalai Lama. Another was that the Tibetan army had taken over Norbu Linka, where the Dalai Lama was staying. Housewives were organized to go on a so-called peace parade, in the course of which a member of the preparatory committee for the Tibetan Autonomous Region, Kangchoin Pagbala Soinam Gyamcho, was killed. The rebels ordered that all Tibetan males, aged from 18 to 60, should fight on the side of the Dalai Lama. But many families took refuge in the preparatory committee's offices. At that time, the Tibetan army mutinied and surrounded the Communist Party headquarters in a demonstration of support for the Dalai Lama. Between March 11th and March 16th, the Dalai Lama sent 3 letters to Tangguang San in which he claimed to be in a quandary. However, whether he wanted it or not, as of the evening of March 16th, when he fled Lhasa, the Dalai Lama became the leading actor in a film. It was a film that had long been planned by the CIA, with a cameraman and film prepared so that they could capture the best scenes. For a while, the Western media were searching for the Dalai Lama, but only the Americans knew where he actually was. The CIA had organized everything. In fact, as early as March 6th, a Hong Kong newspaper had predicted that the Tibetan army would attack the Communist army.